Hello, my name is T. Erin Gruber, and I use she, her pronouns. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Level Up Symposium presented by the Associated Designers of Canada with support from Toasterlab's Mixed Reality Performance Atelier. I am a member of the Board of Directors of the ADC and really excited to be your host for today's event. To begin our session today, I would like to acknowledge that I am currently located on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of First Nations and Métis people. Edmonton, as it is known colonially, is and has been home to a diverse range of Indigenous nations and peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Tsuut'ina, Inuit, and many others. Since time immemorial, this land has been a meeting place for this diverse range of Indigenous peoples who have enriched this place with their histories, languages, and cultures. As a settler, I have benefited from Indigenous generosity, hospitality, and knowledge. And for that, I wish to express my gratitude. In this spirit of gratitude, I would like to acknowledge the support of Canada Council for the Arts, our primary funder of the symposium as a whole, as well as our dedicated member volunteers and volunteers on the board of the ADC who have made this symposium possible. Thank you. We are equally grateful to these additional sponsors: IATSE, University of British Columbia, Theatre Alberta, CITT Alberta Chapter, Concordia University, Ryerson University, and York University. Thank you. For your information, all symposium events will be recorded and presented in a freely available archive. Please check back a few days after any event you've missed to see the recording at levelup.designers.ca. Thank you so much for joining us today. You are watching this Level Up live stream either on the Level Up website, levelup.designers.ca, on HowlRound at howlround.com through our partners at Toasterlab, or on their respective Facebook pages for the ADC or Toasterlab. Regardless of your viewing platform, embedded on the same page as the video is the chat function right here in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Questions can be asked in the chat by clicking on this icon at any time, and I will read these questions out to the presenter during the Q&A portion of our session. If you have technical difficulties at any point in the session, please send an email to levelup@designers.ca for immediate support. This event can be enjoyed through auditory or visual access, or a combination of both. I will read aloud all questions we address from the chat, and this information will also appear visually at the bottom of your stream. Visual access is also supported with captioning. Today we have it live for myself at the bottom of my stream window, and we'll have added captioning for additional speakers in the archive, which will be available within 48 hours of the end of today's event. If you require technical assistance to support your access, please email levelup@designers.ca for immediate support or to provide very valued feedback following our events. If you enjoy this session, please consider donating any amount to the Associated Designers of Canada to support our National Arts Service Organization achieve its goals in the area of advocacy, mentorship, and industry promotion. Donation links are available in screen on all viewing platforms, and I hope you'll consider donating. Thank you so much for your patience with our announcements. Today's event is Moment Factory's The Legacy of Illuminations, Human Nature, featuring Simon Garand and Joel Adria. Moment Factory is a Montreal-based company with an international reputation as one of the most innovative and exciting creators of digital spectacle in live events, and they are truly originators of unique experiences. This from their website, which I thought was really descriptive of their kinds of projects. Drawing from a bottomless multimedia toolbox, Moment Factory delivers high-impact projects that serve as modern-day gathering places. Moment Factory tells stories that reconnect us to each other and to a sense of belonging to something bigger. As technology offers us infinite opportunities to interact through personal devices, the need to physically bring people together seems more vital than ever. Be it a fleeting moment or a repeatable destination-based visit, their objective is simple: to draw people out of their homes toward collective experiences. To do this, they create epic encounters that spark public participation and spread positive energy. I have been a longtime fan of Moment Factory and have attended a number of their events, and I can say that certainly that experience has been realized in all the projects that I've witnessed personally. And today we're really excited to learn about this project, which took place in 2 cities in Canada, from Simon and Joel, who were integral to making it happen. So welcome, Simon and Joel. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Erin. Thanks so much for that awesome intro. That was a really great, excuse me, introduction to Moment Factory. And I'll just introduce myself a little bit. Pardon me. Just to give you a bit of a background on my experience and why we're here today. Personally, I started out working in theater. I actually studied at the University of Alberta in the BFA program in theater production, and that's where I actually met Aaron as well. And I worked with Aaron for several years. We produced shows together as show stages, and bringing projection design into the Alberta and across Canada as well. And then I also worked at the Banff Centre as the faculty projection technologist there for several years, before starting at Moment Factory in 2017, which is sort of what we're going to talk about today, which was sort of my first project at Moment Factory, and it really sort of tied me as well in reflecting on that experience of sort of connecting it with my theater experience, and that's sort of what I want to do today as well with you guys as well. So that's a little bit about me, and so now I'm currently the lead AV designer at Moment Factory. I work specifically with the integration of audiovisual and IT components that really bring our projects to life. And so I'm really happy to be presenting that today for you guys. And then I'll let Smo introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. Hi, everyone. Super happy to be part of that presentation. Simon. I've been working for Moment Factory for 10 years now, presently in Banff. Sorry, the background, I couldn't have the Rockies behind. I have this lobby hotel place, but I'm super excited to talk about that project again, because yes, it was quite a throughout my 10 years at Moment Factory, something that really marked my parkour and my time there. I've been studying in television, in production and post-production, 3D animation software for movies and SFX. And then I moved to Moment Factory as a motion designer and started working there on shows and concerts, and progressively creating shows like we have Lumina's night walks that are like experience in forest. So I'm now a multimedia director, leading teams of creators throughout the projects. So basically with scenographers and media or technical technical team members. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm a big fan of mountains, outdoors. So that specific project was awesome because it happened in Parks Canada lands. So I can't wait to start the presentation. That's pretty much my background.
Yeah, it's awesome, Smo. I think Aaron, it was a good description that Aaron provided, but that's sort of really what our company is about. Our mission is, and our vision is to we do it in public, and so it's really about bringing stories to the public and doing it in person, which I think is really, I think as we're in our COVID capsules right now, it's more than ever obvious that that's really what theater is about as well, is experiencing something in public in a congregation. So I think that's a really interesting link here to do. But just to give you a little bit of a sense about, and we've talked about it, but Moment Factory is a multimedia and entertainment studio. And so we've collected experienced and passionate creators from all around the world. And so we have a lot of experience in content creation, but also the technology that goes into assembling all of these systems as well. And we go ahead, Simone.
Maybe I mentioned like few people that we work with, but we have a bunch of visual artists, technical and creative directors. I mean, we gather people from different background, and you can see by just having us today, Joel and I are from different background, but when we put our forces together, we can create multimedia projects. So we work with scenographers, programmers, inventors, and magicians sometimes, because we need to be very creative in finding ways and solutions to adapt to specific sites and places, and even architects. Like the picture we see at the back was in the Basilique Notre Dame in Montreal, and that was an historical site. So we need to really understand the places we worked in and make sure to preserve them in their perfect ways.
Our teams are sort of divided into different departments. We have a content team that spends their days in tools like After Effects and different and touch. Well, more specifically After Effects, but also 3D applications. They're producing the content and the media for our installations, as well as some of the creative power behind it as well. And then we've got also the interactive team. And so the interactive team is more specifically with creating user experiences that involve technology, so sensors and games. We have specialists in Touch Designer and Unity and Unreal that are creating more gamed experiences and that really have a specialty in user interface design as well. And then we have the scenography team as well, which we sort of renamed a little bit, but is called that we call DOT, Department of Technology kind of thing. So we provide all of the back-end support for the system design, for implementing the lighting systems, the video systems. We bring all of that expertise in addition to the set design and set realization that we call scenography. So in terms of creating the physical elements that we bring to our installations, we all have that in-house as well. And this is our sort of our process that we present regularly. We go through different phases. It's very important that we understand for each when we're working to sort of understand what phase of the project we're in. In the initial phases, we're doing the conception and design phases. It's really to work with the client to create the ideas. Simone, you're usually more involved in the conception and design phases than I am.
Yeah, so we're gonna go usually on site, visit the site, take all the information and inspiration from the place we're gonna work with. It's also a first time when you meet the clients, so try to establish a connection with them, ideate, and come back. It's like scripting the experience, thinking about what we're going to do and setting the base creatively, but also understanding the limitation or technical parameters we're going to have to play with. And then we jump into design. It's where we're going to actually write any voiceover narration we're going to produce. We're going to design the actual visuals. So basically images, all the assets going to be created and later animate in production. We're going to even prototypes for that specific project, Illumination. We add 2 prototypes, lots of stuff, and make sure that all this technology would work. And then we do a list of all the equipments we're going to have to buy and import for the production. And in production, we generate, we create, we animate with the content team. In interactivity, we're going to make sure that we build the system to verify if the interactivity, the scanners, and make it happen for real. And then we're going to assemble, we're going to prepare all the equipment to be shipped on site. We're going to test. We have what we call a black box at moments, our big studios where sometimes parties happen there, but most of the time is used to prototype, test, and assemble. So sometimes we're going to try to build a replica of the space to just get the feel. One thing that is hard in our world is to figure out or remember how big the scale is of what we're creating. And it's not everyone that can come on site to experience it. So we need to transmit it to our team members and give them this sensation and impression. And then once everything is produced, we take our bags and we move on site with the team to integrate, to merge everything, to change, to adapt the content, calibrate. So if we create the visual content, sometimes the colors are not quite yet when we project on the real surface. We deployed all the equipment. We do some night shift to make sure all the programmation is good and calibrated. And then we're going to also use that time to train the team on site. So if it's a show that's going to run for weeks, months, or few days. We're going to train the people there to make sure they're able to run the show. And then we come back and we let the client and the technical team them operate the show, but we're going to provide them with support, update, maintain, and sometime yearly go back. If the show that runs for a few years, we're going to go make sure that everything is still intact, works well, and do updates if needed, or add new zones or effects. Maybe I forget something, Joel.
Yeah, no, I mean that's pretty much the process. And I remember on this particular project, it was sort of my first time working with Moment Factory, and so I was always doing those connections in my head of like the processes that I'm familiar with in theater. It was very much production and design phases were very familiar, and then integration was sort of like our tech week, but sometimes it was tech weeks where we're putting everybody on stage and making sure everything's working together. And the operation phase is more sort of like the run of the show and making sure that everything, that the curtain opens every night on a good show. So I think the spirit is still there, even though we work in a little bit of a different domain. It's kind of the same processes and the same format. We create shows, so we create sort of, we divide them into sort of shows or destinations. This was much more of a show, but it sort of had an installation kind of feel as well. But we do shows, we do ceremonies, different kinds of experiential marketing. We work with artistic partners in concerts as well. And we create destinations, so things that are more permanent and that have are part of public spaces or in the arenas. We also work in some retail as well. So we work in a broad variety of different environments.
Yeah, and we do it in public. That's our motto and how we do it. But I think for this specific project, we can say that we did it with public, and which the public was essential for the experience to make it happen. Because all the visitors and the guests that came really created the experience with the tool we give them. So yeah, let's maybe dive into the experience itself. So Illumination Human Nature. If we go to the next page, that was our visual. It happened on in two national parks. It was an exploration at night during Canada 150 celebration. So we were asked by the BAM Center, you'll see the team there, that the BAM Center asked us to create an experience that would live 3 nights in Banff and 3 nights in Toronto. And we were team up with Sarah Fuller. So we partnership with Sarah Fuller, which is a Canadian artist based in Winnipeg, but I've lived in Banff for many years and worked at the BAM Center. So all our creative team and technical team worked with Sarah to develop an experience that would live on both sites, and using her way of creating shows. She's a visual artist and photographs, so we get really inspired by her creative process, and we blended our force and task force to create that unexpected event on both sides. I was thinking about those both sides. So it was Banff National Parks. The experience happened in 2017 at the beginning of October, and we had a Rouge National Urban Park nearby Toronto and Scarborough at the end of the month. So that was a touring show, happened on 2 national parks, which was kind of a big challenge from the beginning. Yeah, those are historical sites that we need to preserve. So we felt a bit weird of bringing technology in those natural spaces. So that was the first thing of how we're going to do it, but also how we're going to create a show that fits those 2 different sites. And on one end, you have the first national park, Banff, first national park in Canada, and the other end, and I think it still is, the first national urban park and the latest park that have been created by Parks Canada. So we needed to find links between those 2 places, and we had a bunch of objectives for that specific project. So if we go through, we had to maintain a respectful presence, so make sure that respect the site sculptures and ecological signification with low impact on the environment. We have to capture the moment and join in to be part of Canada 150, so make sure that it would celebrate the sites and also Canada and the land. And we worked closely with the First Nations on both sides, so which was really rich for the experience and the narratives of those two experiences. Anchor the experience in the place, so get rooted and inspired by the place. Fuel with collaboration. I mentioned it with the Banff Center, with Sarah Fuller, but also First Nations and creators from the area of the Bow Valley. And entertain and inform. So we usually do entertainment at Moment Factory and very interactive and immersive, but we wanted to bring that notion of context and future. What's the future of these spaces and looking forward? Like Canada 150 was the trigger of creating this experience, but we looked at it as 100 years old is not. It's a speck of time throughout the old history of Canada. So how can we share that rich knowledge of those two sites and craft a collective engagement? That was something that we added to it. We wanted, we do it in public, but how can we bring people together, even strangers together, and share in a common narrative? And what ends up, if I summarize it, and we're going to show you a little video soon of the experience, but it was beyond our first impressions. So we did a creative week at the beginning of conception phase here in Banff at the Banff Center, where we all meet, and we looked at it, and we end up this creative session with looking at the two sites with the aspect of human and nature. So illuminating human nature. In the vast wilds of Banff is hidden a legacy of human intervention. So where everything seems pristine in Banff, the site we were in at Lake Minnewanka is actually, Lake Minnewanka is a reservoir. So it's not a natural lake. So already that was for us quite surprising. So we needed to show it and present it to the public. And while the urban context of Rouge, surrounded by Scarborough and Toronto nearby, it's the most densified population in Canada, where there's a national park, there's a rich and diverse ecosystem living in the Rouge River and close by. So we wanted to unveil or reveal that Seacrest wilderness, and that was the tools were meant for it. The tools we're gonna present you today, those multimedia tools were meant to reveal the hidden stories of those two sites.
So I think, Emily, we're ready to play our video now.
Ce lieu est rempli d'histoire. This land is old. Mais tant de signes nous racontent l'histoire d'une relation continue entre l'homme et la nature. Your group will be given a toolkit. You will use the items as you make the journey. La lanterne. The lantern activates the zone and guides the group along the path. Le sac à dos carries the sound of your experience. Les lampes de poche. Use them to create ambiance or to light up a part of the experience. Le projecteur d'exploration. Point the exploration projector to help visualize the unseen. La carte est le projecteur de navigation. When the navigator projector lights up, this is your cue to shine it on the map. No matter what story we write, our marks on the land today frame the landscape of the future.
That's awesome. Thanks. So just to sort of hopefully give you a bit of a flavor for what the experience was really like. So the experience was really something where the participants were working together to stage these moments of discovery. I think Smo really explained well, like how we're using these tools to reveal these hidden secrets that are in the landscape. And so in the general sort of path of the experience, we started off, you arrived in Banff, you actually started out in the Banff town site because the experience was at Lake Minnewanka, which is about a 30 to 40 minute drive up the mountain. And it was going to be complicated to have everybody park and bring people in and out. So we actually started out the experience on a bus, and you're assigned a group with a sticker that we would sort of be your group for the evening, that you would be assigned your toolkit. And once you arrived, you're given a bit of a tour to the toolkits. Then you sort of set out to explore the different zones where you can activate different zones with your lantern, and then wrap up all together with all the groups around the firetail, where there's sort of the grand finale and sort of the send-off as you go back to the bus. But there were multiple groups in each evening, so that was a major logistical challenge. We had, I think it was 2 sessions of like 3 like busloads. Anyways, there was I think 6 busloads in total, but it was going basically continuously looping through different groups for a good part of 2-3 hours. So it was always a logistical challenge to manage all those tools and get them rotated and all that. So one of the things that was particularly important as well, because we gave a little bit of introduction on the bus, and people sort of signed up kind of knowing what they were going to maybe experience, but it was really important that we introduce the tools inside the tent, and to sort of really explain what it is that was happening, to sort of familiarize the audience members with what they're going to happen, and also to just sort of connect it. I mean, in a way, it's also sort of like a site-specific theater experience. I mean, you are traveling from different zones, but it was sort of very important that we at least introduce the audience to these tools.
And we've designed these tools to make sure that as soon as you see them, you understand what they are meant for. So the lantern looks like a lantern. The backpack looks like a backpack. The projectors, and so that's why it was really important for us in that tent, when you first meet these tools, you really understand. Plus with the voiceover, so it was a 3-minute moment where each tool was being activated one after the other, and a voice, the one we heard in the demo video, was presenting you the tools. So we reuse it for the video, but it was the exact same voiceover for the experience, and it was in both French and English because it was part of Canada 150, so a bilingual experience. That was a challenge to make sure that it's not too repetitive and that everyone gets the information. And then when you walked out the tent, you were given your toolkit.
So let's have a little exploration of what that involved. So we talked a lot about these tools, which we usually called portables, and then we also had what we called deployables, which is basically everything else that went along with it, because there was a lot of tools to manage. But then to make all those tools activate and to create the experiences in the park, we also had a lot of different little equipment and gadgets to deploy on the site. So we'll start out with the portables, and we'll take a look at the tools, and then next we'll look at sort of all the different tools that we deployed in the site as well as deployables. Here's a little photo as well of just, we basically had, I don't know, probably 60 black bins from Home Depot to keep them all organized, because they all had to sort of be numbered and together, because as you walk through the experience, if you put your lantern down, well, then that lantern has to activate, you know, the backpack and the projector that goes with it. So it was very important that we have them all grouped together. So just to review, we had the lantern, and so the lantern activated the experience using a special Bluetooth sensor in the bottom, but you could see there was also changing color and reacting to these different experiences, so it's got a little light in there as well. We had 2 projectors per group. So one was for navigating and sort of showed your progress through the experience. And then the other was could be pointed at things and activated special sequences when you're placed inside of a stand that would project on a tree or a screen. So those were the 2 projectors that were in the group, and probably the most complicated technology part of the experience. There was a backpack which had a soundtrack in it. There had a large speaker and was able to provide a backing track wherever you wandered. Each group had 3 flashlights, and those flashlights were dynamic as well. So they would flash when the train goes by and would change colors to sort of fit the mood as well. And maybe Simone, do you want to talk about the brick as well?
Yeah, the bricks. So those were obviously not technological tools, but I mean, we couldn't. It was a group of between 10 and 15 people, so we try to have as much tools for everyone, but depending of the size of the group, sometimes smaller. But we wanted also to connect one of the tools to the site. So the bricks were used in Toronto, and the coal, which were rocks painted in black, was used in Banff. So those tools were, we wanted to make sure that everyone will carry something with them through the experience. And sometimes we know that some visitors and guests are more passive or prefer to look and not really interact. Or so it was a good object for those people that didn't want to touch the projector and make sure they don't do any mess with it. But we know that the younger people were just grabbing the projector to be able to project all around. So the bricks in Toronto, it's part of one of the story we unveiled during the experience. There was a factory there in the past, and they just dumped all the bricks in the Lake Ontario. But with time, they started with the waves. They started to erode and creating the same sound of the rocks that are on the shores of Lake Ontario. So those bricks are now all the edges are smoothed and they looks like rocks, but you can still see some of the holes, and the coloring of the bricks are still there. So it's kind of, when you look carefully on the shores of this lake, you discover those bricks. So we had a team pick up bricks to make sure that we would have them in the experience and replace them at the end of the experience to keep it as it was. And we in Banff we had the coal. So in Cascade Mountain, just right beside the site, inside the mountain, there were coal mines. So we wanted to unveil that part of the untouched and pristine image of the mountain, but inside there's a coal mine factory there. So we wanted people to carry it, but just to add a layer of surprise and effect during the experience, we painted them with a layer of UV paint. So they reveal and started to shine under the UV light during one moment in one of the zones that was presenting them the specific elements. And then people were invited to create little monolights with them or place them and tap them together to create music. So it's how we add people interact even with the non or very low tech tool.
So the logistics of these kits was, like I was mentioning before, it was quite an endeavor. We had, I think, up to 120. Yeah, it was about 120 of these lights, either flashlights or lamp or lanterns. And so these were rechargeable DMX lights that we had to make sure got back on the charger each night. There they are charging away. But we had to number them all. We had to make sure everybody got the right group, and also shuttle them back and forth, because at a certain point in the evening, we had to get the groups that were finished, we had to get it back to the start of the installation. So we had a little golf cart that had to go across a one-way bridge at the right time, at the right moment when there's no group passing, to make sure that we get the kids back to the beginning so that the next group can start their experience. So we're not going to look at every single projector, every little tool in detail, but I did want to show a little bit inside a few of them. And if at the end you guys have questions, we can talk about them as well. This is the exploration projector. So it was able to sort of illuminate different experiences. Inside the exploration projector, there's lots of little gadgets. So we found that basically cell phone recharge batteries, we found the biggest one that we could find, and that was able to power the little laser projector and the Raspberry Pi inside the box for about just exactly the amount of time that we really needed the installation to run, which is around 6 hours. So, and as well as a speaker. So there's a speaker, a laser projector, a Raspberry Pi, the battery, and then a last minute add was a little more ventilation because things were getting a little bit too toasty in there. So there's an extra little fan as well to make sure that everything got properly cooled. And so these were really just prototypes. We were creating prototypes as a laboratory experiment. There weren't really finished products like we've deployed on some other Luminas now that are designed to last for a very long time. These were really just kind of trying to figure out how we could achieve this kind of thing. And so what's quite unique specifically about the projector that we chose, it is a little Pico projector that I know lots of people have experimented in theater for either creating a model box, creating a previs, but also, as part of performance. What was really interesting about these ones is because they were laser, and they were actually laser emitter as opposed to laser source, is that they are totally autofocusing. So no matter where you pointed, it was never out of focus, which was really neat. It really kind of added a level of detail that is usually pretty hard to achieve with moving around Pico projectors. And the other thing was in the beginning, I remember in the beginning, and I wanted to share some of the things that didn't work as well, because I think during part of the phases of the project, there was sort of some very radical dreams of how we would be able to create sort of augmented reality as you move the projector around, and maybe as you're inside of a box, well, then you can like reveal something like a flashlight in a much more dynamic way. But in the end, we found that we were still able to get a very good experience without sort of this high-tech gyro and all this stuff. It was really a Raspberry Pi sort of doing all the work, doing the little video playback and triggering the events as you go through the experience. And the other key component that we wanted to show was the lantern. So as I said, it was a DMX, rechargeable DMX light inside the bottom of the lantern. We had to hollow out the bottom of a typical gas lantern and add a special cover so that it would light up nicely and with a diffuse surface like that. And then each one had a specially coded Bluetooth component as well, so that when you place the lantern on top of what we called the activation spot, the system would, or the zone would come to life and trigger the different lighting, sound, video components, and also activate the tools that are in that group, so that they came to life with that particular sequence in the zone that you've stopped. So this was what the activation spot looked like. And this kind of brings us as well into deployables and sort of how that connected with the entire system.
Mm-hmm. And maybe I can add, before we jump into the deployables, like those tools were basically the same experience you add with the tools in both sites, but they would reveal different stories. So the content was updated between the two sites. So we had specific content for Banff, music, projection, elements, assets, animation, to reveal the stories about the bisons coming back to parks. And then we had different stories about the blinding turtles on the shore of Lake Ontario. So we really, that was the best way of telling different stories, but using the same format of experience with the same tools, just having to update the content between both. And we make sure that at least the parameters of the experience were the same in terms of how many zones. So we reuse the same activations, but we reuse the same gear on both sides. We just repurpose them depending of the stories we had. So it was a challenge at the beginning, but once we nailed it and figured it out, it was easy to reuse the kind of similar soundtrack, but record a different voiceover, keep the same timing. So some parameters for the creative aspect of it, but it really get us very flexible in how we could create different shows with the same gear and same technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. So it brings us kind of to the deployable. So activation spot was an important deployable. We had probably between the ones that were in the zones, and then we also it has sort of a double purpose to sort of unite the groups as well with the number on it. So when you arrived, you had a color-coded numbered spot that you had to sort of meet your friends around. So there's the activation spots, but then there was all sorts of different show controls and other devices that we had to deploy in the field. So that's what we'll talk about a little bit next. It was a lot of experiments. And so these are sort of all the different experiments that we were really pushing, and some worked and some didn't. And again, if there's ones that jump out at you and you're like, oh, I'd really love to know a little more about that, we can talk about some of them more in detail at the end. But some of the big ones were, that we're using mesh Wi-Fi to join all of our systems together. We had a lot of battery-powered lighting. All the lighting was battery-powered, so it had to be removed and redeployed every day. But there was also some projectors that were ultra low power that we could deploy, which is a little bit trickier because they're not as bright. We're using Bluetooth to trigger things and able to like Simon said, not only have a fleet of 60 devices, but then to be able to update that content both in integration, but then for the next site as well. So there was a lot of technology to go into it. Here's a couple photos. There's just sort of a collage of the different installations. We had the prospector's tent in the bottom corner there. That was sort of where you were introduced to the tools. But then we had as well just regular little outdoor tents that we camouflaged to put some of our show control elements because there was snow in Banff. And luckily there was, in the Toronto site in Rouge, it had rained and poured all summer. And so it was flooded out for almost the entire summer, and we really weren't sure if we were going to be able to deploy the project. It wasn't until the last minute that was sort of decided that yes, we would finally go ahead. But I don't recall there being too much rain in the end for the actual performance, which was very lucky. So. Yeah.
And you can see on those pictures like road cases that were specifically also built for the tools, for the equipment, to make sure that these toolkit would be recharged at night and transported safely. We talked about the lanterns, but part of the deployable aspect was to how we're going to carry the gear across Canada and make sure we're able to recharge them and have a truck nearby the base station to recharge them at night and bring them and deploy them every day as well.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a lot of experiments, and it was also a lot of sort of proving to ourselves whether we could do something or not. So sort of experimenting with, could we really make a battery-powered zone with no wiring? All the DMX was wireless. How do we create, an experience that is more non-linear? Because that was another thing that we'd never really done before. We had done a few Luminas in the past, but they were always very fixed path with a start and a finish. And in this case, we're giving a little bit of flexibility to the groups to just go to the first zone that interests them and then go to another zone, but not necessarily always in the same order, which worked in some ways, and in other ways was very complicated because in general, crowd control just doesn't really work that way. Giving people too much flexibility was kind of difficult. But it still kind of worked out in the end. So there was a lot of different experiments going So show control is sort of our term for the tech booth at Moment Factory. It's really the computers and the equipment that's going to, be our amplifiers or DMX nodes to output all of the system. And so that's what we call our show control systems. And so we had to sort of miniaturize and outdoorize these for a temporary installation. One thing in the top left, we've got actually one that was entirely battery powered. So this little box went out onto the beach in Toronto, and also sort of on the shore there in Minnewanka, and its activation spot was connected to it, but there was no. It was totally wireless and had no other power cabling operating it. So it wirelessly connected back up to the rest of the system, but it ran all night, triggering the events and playing back different lighting sequences, sort of all by itself. So it was sort of an experiment with that as well. And so in total, we had 5 show control racks that were sort of laid out across the site. And it was a wireless mesh system that connected the show controls together. So it was a lot of wireless. As I said, we had the wireless DMX system. So we had no DMX cable to run. There was the wireless link between the show controls, but then we also allowed the Raspberry Pi computers inside the projectors to sort of just provide little updates to make sure that they're still online and connected. And so that was very challenging as well, because they were sort of stuck inside their boxes and there was no external antenna. So it worked about 50% of the time. And there was a lot of coordination of all the wireless systems as well. Because we're using Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and wireless DMX, all on the same 2.4 gigahertz frequencies, we had to do a lot of channel coordination to make sure that the wireless DMX wasn't going to start drowning out the signals of the Bluetooth that triggered the projectors, for example. So we had to do a lot of coordination for that. And I remember when we were testing it out in the black box, we had everything operating, and it was a much more condensed space than at the actual national park. But one of our studio technicians came into the studio and he said, "Oh, my Bluetooth headphones just don't work anymore," because we were just overloading all of the channels available in the Wi-Fi spectrum. So it was quite an interesting challenge that way.
Yeah, and that's why we ask the visitor on their way to the site on the bus to put their cell phone on airplane mode. So some laughed at it, but it was really for us a real thing to make sure that we could run the show without any problem. And it also helped people to kind of disconnect for a moment and find themselves like in an experience without being disturbed by their phones or taking pictures.
Mm-hmm. And so we had so integrating all the systems, we had to figure out how the show controls would talk to each other and everything. But at a base level, the lanterns and the flashlights were essentially all one DMX universe. And so we had to sort of centralize that control and then sort out how we would light up, somebody's lantern in group 3, but not, somebody in lantern in group 5. And so there's sort of a central control that managed that single DMX universe that we'd installed sort of at the top of the highest point that we could find on the site. And that was sort of the main transmitter out onto the tools. But we did still have a few like dark spots, and so there was certain parts of the experience where we knew that you were going to lose signal from the transmitter, which would black out your flashlight, which would really not be good. And because we're putting people out into the forest with just these flashlights, and if these flashlights turn off, well, that's no good. So we had like different techniques where it would hold the last value, but we had sort of like some fail-safe points to make sure that the flashlight got its light up signal right before you go into the next zone, so that we don't leave people scrambling in the dark. It's a lot of fun. And sort of the last deployable thing that we wanted to talk about was actually the bus experience. So Simon, do you want to talk a little bit about how the bus worked?
Sure. So in terms of creative, we really wanted to start the experience on your way to the site. So we had 15 minutes on a bus. We didn't want people to like wait, or we wanted to surprise them also and start the anticipation of getting on site. So what we did is we used light and sound. So the host person that was assigned to the bus, we had 3 buses that were running all night long to bring people back and forth to the original starting point, and we stick or glue or magnet string of LED in the middle of the bus. That was off when people entered the bus. So for maybe the 4-5 first minutes, nothing happened. And while they were getting and approaching the site, the soundtrack starts. So really a big flash of light in the middle of the night. And that voiceover invites you to reflect on what you're going to experience in terms of narratives. So looking out at the land and trying to imagine how the story are hidden in the sites. So the voiceover was different for both sides, so obviously, but we really started to trigger, tease, and invite them to set a mood, invite them to reflect on what they're going to experience and discover. And then it was also a good opportunity at the end, just before arriving on site, to tell them a bit what's going to happen. So we just mentioned that they would receive a toolkit, that they would navigate in group. We would give them a sticker, so they just receive a sticker with a group number, so they could look at each other on the bus, like who's in my group, and they could gather around a spot. So it was a good moment to give them some information about the narratives, but also to give them some information about the logistical aspect. So the toolkit would be used during the experience. There was no wrong way to use them, and then when they come back, they would just have to give them back before jumping back on the bus. And on the way back, there was no soundtrack or music because we wanted the people to share the experience. And also we give them, and you'll see in the next section, we give them a little booklet with all the stories and they found on site, so they could explore it during the way back on the bus. So yeah, it was quite a challenge, and Joel will be able to go into the technical aspect of it. But logistically, we didn't know what will be the buses, type of buses every night. So sometimes we had school buses, sometimes it was a coach bus. So the ceiling was different for both. They were arriving on site maybe an hour before the show starts. So we had like 15 minutes to rig them, place them, and at the end of the night, we were removing all the technical aspect, all the technical parts of it to be replaced the day after. So it was we needed to be very flexible the way we thought that. And I always thought it would look like a bomb, but maybe Joel can go through this.
Yeah, it was when we first started like thinking about this, like, well, how are we going to play an LED, strip inside a bus, with audio? And then it was we sort of insisted all the time. We were like, okay, but it's going to be the same bus, right? Like the same bus every night. And we're like, well, we don't really know. It's like, okay, but let's just assume it's the same bus. But really, in the end, it was never the same bus. It was always a different bus. Sometimes even there were certain bus drivers that are like, well, no, my shift's over. I have to go pick up my, and they're like taking off with our kit, and we have to like chase after them and like, uninstall the kit because the bus didn't show up or whatever. So we designed this around basically a battery box from, it's the Quebec equivalent of Princess Auto, for those of you guys who know what Princess Auto is. It's at Addison here in Montreal. We got a battery box. We've got some 12-volt batteries in there, and we basically have a couple of different voltage dividers, and then a Raspberry Pi. So the Raspberry Pi, again, is able to play back the sound and output a little DMX stream to our LED strip manager called Pixlight, and that's able to play back the sequence. And we even had a little FM transmitter because we weren't sure if we'd be able to install speakers in the bus or not. In the end, I think it was mostly portable speakers that we brought with us, but we had a little FM transmitter, so if ever we needed to tune into the bus's radio system, we could do that as well. So it was a really fun little project, mini project in a much larger project to achieve.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not adding to it? The fire tail. So after exploring each of the zones and station around the park, each group on their map had a little countdown, and the countdown indicated them to reach the fire tail zone. And it's where all the toolkits from all the groups will come alive together. So I don't know if we move forward in the presentation, I think you have an example maybe of what it was at that moment.
Yeah, do you want to? I have a little clip.
Yeah,
there's no sound, but it's just.
Okay. So it's an extract of the video we showed you earlier. So basically, we created content. The same content was playing and trigger at the same time in all of the toolkits, and we also add because it was more like a show moment for everyone to gather about that fire. Projectors in. On site. I remember one night in Banff, we didn't have any power on site and everything run battery power. So we needed to cut one of the projector for that specific moment, but everything else worked pretty fine. So we had lights placed, we had a little island in Banff, like you can see, we put a transparent mesh to project on, and all those projectors were shooting around the fire pit. And also at the floor, and they were standing on the little projector stand that we've designed. We could adjust the specific angle, so all of the people in each group that carries the projector will place them around the fire pit, and they would play the same content at the same time, but because there was no harsh edge on the screen, on the image, they were kind of blending into each other. So it was very fun to see how it was creating like a wallpaper of an animated moment, and it was taking all the stories that you unveil during the experience that were taking shape and all aligned together in that 4 or 5 minutes show moment. And you can see on that picture, all the lanterns were turning blue at the same time. So it was really a communal moment that was important for us to create a more bigger impact for everyone. And it was also a logistic approach to it, to make sure that everyone received the little booklet that we've designed. But it was also right after the fire tail, people was walking back and they were giving back their tools. They were all arriving at the same time on the buses. So there was also logistical, but it was creating that finale moment of the show. And this is the little booklet that we've done. On one side, it was for Banff, and when you flipped the booklet, it was for the Rouge experience. So even if you didn't go to Banff, you could read what happened there. And it was some of the visual we've created, some of the assets for the show that were right there in the booklet. It was printed on a recycled paper. So it was quite a nice artifact to bring back home after carrying all those tools during the experience.
So the firetail was, like we said, because it didn't follow any of the same patterns. The pattern was, okay, you arrive with your tools with a lantern, and you put the lantern on the activation spot, and then the tools from that group activate. And then the finale was basically nothing like that pattern. So all of our little software tools, okay, to trigger the lantern and do this, it's like, okay, we have to totally rethink this. We have to put, a Raspberry Pi, inside the fire pit to trigger, all of the projectors in that particular zone. But we had to make sure that we weren't triggering it wasn't all of the tools, because it was actually only the tools within that sort of super group of 10 people because otherwise we would start triggering the tools that people are picking up at the entry because there's people arriving at the same time. So there was a lot of sort of subgrouping and reorganizing of all the code for that sort of finale moment to make sure that it would all play in sync at the same time. And like I said, also shuttling them all back to the beginning, making sure they're charged. I believe also on the very last night in Toronto. So we, you've seen a few pictures now where like we actually had a cube van that we put everything inside. It's where people would take the projectors out of their storage road case. They'd start plugging in all the USB ports to boot them up because we didn't have any fancy switches or anything. But when they were on the charger, charging with, about 30 different, 10-port USB hubs and all this stuff, they pulled, like a solid 15 amps, like between all of them. And so it was right on the limit. And so there was one night where basically the power bar tripped in one of the charging boxes, which totally knocked out all of the charging. So we arrived at around, I don't know, 2 or 3. It was the last evening, we'd maybe had a little small party the night before, and we started checking them all, and it was like, oh, none of these are charged. So we charged it maybe like half of the normal amount of charge that it would have normally had for that evening. And of course, the partners were coming to see the show that night, and it's very important that everything operate. And I would say about 95% of them made it all the way until the very end of the firetail, and then you could just see like it would go to sort of the Korean like projector logo because finally the battery had finally died on the little Raspberry Pi. So there was always some very exciting moments on this project.
Exciting, yes.
So yeah, we just had a few takeaways. We did this project in 2017, and so we've, there's been a little bit of a legacy from it. We've been doing outdoor Lumina projects, which are outdoor night walks for a while, but there's still something really magic about taking a show outside, and especially during COVID times, it's something that's a little more possible depending on the warning level in your region, but it's something that's still a little bit more doable than say an indoor experience. So it's something that we still think is really valuable and really adds something to the experience. And we also had sort of like some overall observations is these small group outdoor performances are really interesting as well, to sort of group people into smaller segments. It's something that is sort of COVID friendly as well right now. If you're moving together as a single pod, it really brings an interesting element to the experience as well. Small, there's also the artifact. Do you want to talk a little about some of those?
Yeah, like this idea of making tools feel analog, and I think it immediately connected people to the tools and stop thinking about the technology. Like instead of use an object that like to make function the experience, it was more that idea of going on a hike at night in parks. So what do you bring? You bring your lantern, your flashlight, your backpack. So it was how we design these tools, and I think it really make people play with them from as soon as they get them. So you could see the leader of the group with the lantern running to go to the activation spot and make sure waiting for everyone that gather around to be able to play. So it was that idea of traveling to a park with those tools. And of course, those tools were essential to the experience, but for what you're gonna get from it as a visitor, but also from the part of the technological part of it. And I think we went also further into learning. If I jump into storytelling, like this idea of stories exist where you're creating shows and experiences. You just have to dig deep enough to reveal them, and then you can use them and use them as a way of exploring and discovering those stories. So sometimes we try to make up stories and something more fantastical, but I think this was a strong aspect of the experience. And if I can connect it to what people said about it in Rouge, particularly, like it was a new national park, so people didn't know much about it. They knew the place pretty well because it's a beach during winter, so people can just go and hang out. but they really connected to the site, knowing and learning about how many fungus species existed there, and what they're blinding turtles in the lake, like they live here or by the sea, and all these salmon going up the Rouge River. So this was really a good feeling after the experience to see that people in the area, neighbors also, like this idea of connecting strangers together. For sure, today it will be a bit different. You could do it with your families, family or friends, but at that time it was people from the neighborhood that say, "Oh yeah, I'm living on that street. Oh yeah, but we're super close by." Like, and they just met for the first time through an experience at night nearby their house. So that was quite rewarding to see it and see that it really connected people to their land.
Yeah, no, and I think that's, to me, I loved exploring all the technology on this project, but I still felt that the stories that, is also something that I remember so vividly from the experience. I'd spent, 3-4 years in Banff, and I had never known that there used to be a town underneath Lake Minnewanka. There's the kind of things that you just experience and learn about in such a different way. It was really cool. And the last thing we just wanted to mention was that one of the experiments we wanted to achieve was whether we could make an installation that's carbon neutral, and that's was actually found it was quite achievable. We definitely used a lot of techniques to reduce the amount of power consumption in the installation, but then we were also able to offset those with the purchase of carbon offset credits to make the entire experience, including our travel to Banff and to Toronto and everything, totally carbon neutral. And we've since then looked at, that the legacy of that is that we are also evolving our processes to make other projects carbon neutral, and figuring out ways that we can make things as efficient and light on the environment as possible. Is there anything else you want to add, Simone, before?
No, I think we have questions that are already starting to come in, so
yeah,
we'll be able to answer them.
Yeah, I'm so excited to share these questions from the audience. And I wanted to say before we launch into that, just a big thank you. This presentation was so detailed, and for those of us who couldn't attend and see this experience in person, I feel like we really got a sense of what it was, not only from your goals, but also to the full execution of it. And since we are a dramaturgy of performance and digital performance and design festival, hearing, Simon, from you about the conceptual process and the ideas behind this technology is so valuable for everyone watching. It becomes very easy to get scared or bogged down or intimidated by this idea of moving into new technological challenges or taking on new tools. And hearing from you about this creative process that you went through, and that this sort of determined your development of technological tools from this place of sort of this artistic influence or this artistic impulse, I think is really, really helpful for all of us to remember. And I love what you highlighted in your takeaways, that a strong story will shine, regardless of how you package it. And I think that is such a strong message that's been coming from many of our other artist presenters as well, that many of us are excited by these technologies. We want to try new modalities. We want to use new methods. But at the end of the day, you need that core influence of a strong and important story to really get through to any public audience. So thank you for those takeaways and for sharing all your experiences with this project. Such an ambitious one and such an exciting one to hear about. I wish we had more time almost to delve into all these details. But let's go to some of the questions which have come from our listeners. The first one here is, what happens to these custom tools? Are they repurposed or reused in future projects?
Yeah, so that was something, even actually from the beginning, that we were thinking about ahead of time, because we were like, well, we're going to be buying all these lights and all these things, and so again, but the basis of these most of these tools are wireless DMX fixtures. So we've been using them on other projects and internally for research and development, which sometimes also means, parties at Moment Factory, but different things, all kinds of different uses internally, but also for events that we deploy on different installations. And so there's been sort of a legacy of all that equipment. It sort of pops up in different, for example, the show controls, we've definitely reused them. The tools, we've used the little laser projectors for different R&D projects. So we've continued to, and certainly a Raspberry Pi does not sit around very long time at Moa Factory. People are always making Raspberry Pi projects out of them. So we were able to really reuse a lot of that technology, and we still keep, a good collection of them as well if we ever want to do prototypes or demos of what that technology could do.
I think that's really wonderful to hear, because I think in our sort of theater world, or in any kind of production world, we think a lot about these resources and how they can be added to almost like a stock of resources. And as artists, a lot of us are being called on to invest in tools ourselves. The theater maybe doesn't want to go down that road permanently, or the company we're working with isn't willing to invest. But being able to look at how investing in tools can serve us and future projects as well. And once we have the knowledge of how to use these things, they become launching boards for future artistic impulses. So it's never wasted, hey?
No, and the tools themselves, but also the knowledge. Like, we reuse the knowledge and the learnings from those tools to create new experience and permanent experiences at Moment Factory. You can think of one that Joël and I worked on, which is a Kamui Lumina in Japan. So we, with that background experience, we add with Illuminations, it was really worth to use those tools as prototypes. I'm working on a project right now, and we brought a few parts of it to be able to prototype and test something else. So we repurpose them in that way, but they're really concretized in some real project for real clients that are more stable, of course, and efficient.
That's wonderful. We have another question here. Why was it important or meaningful to the event that the audience participated actively?
I have for me, when I'm thinking about an experience and how we create experiences, I always think about this quote of, this is attributed to Confucius, which is, "Tell me and I'll forget, show me and I might remember, involve me and I will understand." And by bringing people to get involved into that process of revealing the stories and really being activating the zones and being part of it in a group that reaches our also motto, which is we do in public, really make it all. Like that was the only way to really connect and discover those stories. So I think the tools were also the toolkits are were tangible metaphors of for stewardship. So we said, like, inviting participants to consider the tools, but also all the tools we have to protect nature and how we can transpose it in more like with our laws, and how we can connect people with the land, and how active they can be in those in being part of protecting the land and those stories and sharing them as well.
So here again, we see another really strong connection between your conceptual process of what you want the takeaway for the audience to be and the actual delivery method itself, which I think shows that that level of conceptual sophistication really contributes to an audience's final takeaway. And I love what you said about neighbors meeting each other through doing this experience, and then maybe going on to have a lasting connection, purely because they bought a ticket to this thing that was happening down the street. So I think that beyond the content of the piece, you're also activating sort of an experiential, a value-driven experience for people who are spending time together. So that's really interesting too. We have another great question here for potential learners. Learning to design a show like this would be experience design, yes. Do you have any recommended programs and/or schools? Where does Moment Factory recruit their people from?
Well, I mean, I can say that, our background at Moment Factory is a huge variety of people, and so, I mean, there's not a whole lot of programs or schools. I mean, there's in Montreal and even at this point, there's other places as well that do multimedia training, and so some of it is always going to be geared more towards computation and programming, but then there's going to be more that are more creative driven. But at the end of the day, our industry is not very, like, it doesn't really have a lot of specific training programs. There's it's coming from theater, it's coming from performance, but then also from architecture, from industrial design. It really comes from a lot of different experience. I don't know if, Simon, you have other programs that you've heard of.
No, I think it's so vast. You can, and I think it's one of the richness of our talent people at Moment Factory. I'm always amazed by discovering new team members when you work with them, how they look at things, how they think about things. So even and we have what we call at Moment Factory elevation meetings. So when we design or think about a project, we're gonna pitch it, but internally to people. And sometimes it's someone from the finance. They're gonna give a comment on, oh yeah, but I've seen that, or what is it exactly, by asking question. Or so I think it's so broad. Like everybody can contribute in making and thinking about an experience. So yes, for sure, my experience in TV helped me to understand more the background and how we can create visual, but also how all the technology works. But in terms of design and UX, we have experts at Moment Factory I'm working with, and I think it was also with the experience as a seeing and experiencing Illumination personally brought me a lot of learning to how to design experience and what people how they play, how they interact with the space.
That's fantastic. So really having a strong base in design or technology, whatever area is your natural talent or your natural interest. But then also I think all the people I've met from Moment Factory have this intrepid, almost innovator or inventor quality. The kind of people who want to do things that have never been done before, who want to take on the headaches of that mind map you showed us of all the things you had to test before you figured out that, oh, okay, the Wi-Fi mesh is gonna work, or yes, we can make Bluetooth function, and even if we have all these other DMX wireless things going, like the kind of people who are really willing to throw themselves into the lion's den of developing new concepts and ideas and technologies. I think that is it's like a narrow subset of innovators in every field. And I love this idea that Moment Factory has plucked the best ones from all these different backgrounds. It doesn't surprise me with the level of success you've had all over the world. Another question, how would you describe the sound design and composition elements? How did they interact with the other elements of storytelling?
That's a very good question, because sound for me is the essence sometime of an experience. It really brings the vibe, but also make us kind of disconnect from our reality and bring us into the stories. So we work with Vincent, which is our sound composer at Moment Factory, which is super creative. You're gonna pick up sounds from when we go on site visit. You're gonna record the sound of the water there, and record the sound of I don't know, branches and stuff like that. So you're gonna collect it, and sometimes what you're saying, so sometimes he's recording, I'm gonna reuse it as something in the experience and play with the sound and transform it. For Illumination, we also collaborate with the Eyahe Nakota, which is a group based in Calgary. So we play with them, where they send us samples. We collaborate with like how the experience inspired them, and then with the help of Vincent, we kind of modernize, play with, integrate it into our soundtrack. So that was a really back and forth and creative process. So it really brought us another level of authenticity to the site and the experience. And you can hear it in the trailer we showed you earlier. And in terms of how did they interact with the other elements of the storytelling, was really connected to each of the stories. So the soundscape was when we were talking about the flooded town of Lake Minnewanka, we really brought like sounds of the past, the water, when we talked about the ice shields and the sound of the land moving. So we really emphasize the storytelling. So with not only music and voiceover, the voiceover also, it's like you were telling a story in the middle of the forest at night, something happened. So we really wanted to be to have that voiceover to carry you along, and as if it was a guide. So all these elements combined really created a full experience, an immersive experience, if I may say.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that description. Here's a wonderful question. I'm always curious about this too. Did any visitors wander off path? Were there chaperones?
No, but a team member, yes.
But sorry, what did you say? Nobody.
I said a team member from our team when we did the site visit in Lake Minnewanka first, where I remember having our producer walking along, and we were looking at like, where is he? It's in the middle of January, and so it really raised up something in our mind to make sure that it was safe for everybody for the experience, because anybody could get lost. But if we found him, it was alive. He came back in Montreal. So.
But it's funny you mentioned, because it was oftentimes actually the opposite, because we were creating this experience. So in Banff, it was more or less closed. Like nobody's going up to Lake Minnewanka in the middle of the night, after dark. So that one was fairly easy. There weren't people sort of wandering around. They were wandering around during the day. So we were setting up during the day, and there was usually like hordes of people all over the place. Just like, you're installing lights that they might walk off with. In Banff, it was pretty calm, though. I mean, most tourists are probably not going to just like walk off with your wireless DMX light. Toronto was sort of a bit of a different story, though, because it was basically a jogging path for the most part. And by law, we couldn't close the site. So it was an open site. And people did walk off with their lights. We had to chain a few of them to the ground, and we had a little alarm system into these lights so that we had to go around activating them, and then they'd go off, start alarming, and I have to like run over there with my tablet and turn it back off. So there was, because the train would go by and activate the alarm, and so that was a very much open site. And so there's usually people wandering in and sort of wondering like, oh, what's going on here? Because they just going out for a jog against the flow of, like 100 people flowing down the hill. And so they're wondering like, oh, can I join in on this experience? And you're like, well, I mean, no, but yes, you certainly can. And I think for most of the fire tales, I think in Toronto, we definitely had additional guests that were not part of the experience. They were just there to see whatever cool show was happening at that point.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's so interesting. There's a great question here. What current projects are you working on? Are they now more so product or marketing based? What's your shift been like?
So I don't think we can talk about, projects that are coming. That's general like Moment Factory rules. But we can definitely talk about the legacy of this project, because I think Camus Lumina is really interesting in terms of how we continued that thread of the idea. I was thinking, just as you were talking about how the soundscape occurs, we sort of evolved to a next level with Camus Lumina, because we had for Banff, the sound was not perfectly in sync. So we weren't able to synchronize what's, sort of sample accurate between, the projector and the backpack and what's in the zone. So it was kind of like more or less the backpack would maybe play sound effects that would go with music, or the vice versa. But we were sort of limited in terms of how well those would play together. But with Camus Lumina, we were actually able to achieve sort of a next level. So you get a walking stick that lights up and has a speaker, but that walking stick is in sync with the other walking sticks. So when you're walking along and you have a soundtrack playing, it's all in sync with the zone and with the other walking sticks. So we've taken a lot of that and sort of taken it to the next level in a lot of the other installations.
That's fantastic. Here's a question about the tech side. Do you build with Arduino or have other go-to easy access tools for folks looking to get into experience design projects?
So for this project, there was there's actually no Arduino, believe it or not, but there was a lot of Raspberry Pis, as you saw. I think Raspberry Pi is just a fantastic tool to get started with, because it's very much a computer, so it's familiar. You can sort of go in as deep or as light as you want. There's so many different, and it's so portable and simple and inexpensive to be able to create something with. But that being said, it's also it can be a little bit of a blocking experience if you're trying to create something out of it. We do build as well with Arduino on other projects. So for example, it wasn't specifically Arduino, but it was a different kind of embedded controller that we used in some of the later projects. So, things like the ESP32, which lets you do Wi-Fi and it's basically an Arduino with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. It's definitely a very cool way to get started as well. So those are some good things to check out.
Great, thank you, Joel. I think this question about process is really wonderful. How many dress rehearsals would you have? Where would you run the experience, where you would run the whole experience on site at night?
One?
No, I think it was 2 nights, but we had a few people coming just like for making sure the bus ride was okay. They understand the tools. We did some prototypes and testing at Moment Factory during the summer, so with colleagues or people that were coming just to show them the tools. Do you understand? Does it work? Like, can you? And we have the kitchen right by the black box, so we were creating path in the kitchen to have them like to explore. We used the refrigerator to test the battery to make sure that at night in October will the battery survive with the tool. We went also on the Montreal in Montreal, so it's our closest forest. So we brought our gear there at night, sneaking the forest nearby the lake. So testing stuff. So we were part of the dress rehearsals process, but on site we had with real public just one run through of the experience to make sure the timings also were okay. So I think well, it's what I can remember. I don't know if Joel.
Yeah, no, I think it was really just one. And I remember the first run through, we were all like in our black coats with radios and just kind of watching. And like, we had one eye on our laptop where like we're checking the Wi-Fi and making sure that like, everything is triggering where, but it was very up down to the wire in the sense that we weren't really 100% sure when people were putting, their lantern down, whether it was all going to operate. And I remember some of our, developers, they were like fixing code like on the fly as people were walking through the experience because they're like, oh yeah, that's not going to work. We're gonna have to update that timeline like before they got to the next zone. So I remember the first dress rehearsal was extremely dynamic.
But I'd like to hear from you, Simon, about how much testing went in ahead of time. So although there was only, like in a rushed theater production, maybe one dress rehearsal or one paid preview with an audience, but unlike theater, that your timeline of development and producing involved many, 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 many iterations of testing. And I think that's a really important thing for people who are shifting gears to consider that, when you're developing these new things, that so much care and attention went into testing each tool. There was a question here, where did the funding come from, public or private, for this project?
So I did send you the exact founded by statement that was from the BAM Center website, so you can share it. But it was part of Canada 150 celebration, so it was offshore public, and also supported from the Mackey Family Creation Endowment and Guy Mitchell and Archie McIntosh Creation Endowment Fund. So some private fund also that usually runs with the BAM centers, how it works.
Wonderful. So I like that, in that there's a combination there, right? So like everything in this project, many, many things had to come together in order to make it possible. Yeah. I think that's a wonderful place to sort of call it. We just have maybe 2 more minutes in our time together. So I wanted to say, is there anything either of you would like to share about this project, about your experience working with Moment Factory, about the shift since COVID has hit, before we call it a wrap?
But maybe just to thank all the people that worked on that project. The last question was about how many people work in total on that project. I think it was, we can count them by hundreds. Like, we were probably 30 on site during the integration, but so many people at Moment Factory, but also I'm thinking at the BAM Center, and also in Rouge, in Banff, Parks Canada, like many people collaborated to make this event happen. So really want to thank them, and yeah, that's it.
Wonderful.
You did it. You said great, Simon. Thank you very much. And if ever you're interested in seeing Luminas, there's Luminas which are not the same experience, but because it really lives on in our memories at this point, the Illuminations project. But we do have night walks in Whistler, in Toronto, and there's several in Quebec as well as internationally. So if you ever are interested in sort of experiencing that kind of a night walk experience, there are Luminas to be seen. So.
Yeah, they're absolutely a fantastic experience, and I really encourage anyone, when it's safe to do so, if you have access to one, that you definitely go out and give it a try. Thank you so much to our guests, Simon and Joel. I'm so grateful to have you both here. It's wonderful to hear about this groundbreaking project and to all the technology that went into it and all of the conceptual effort and artistic inspiration that you drew on. Just a big thank you to both of you. I'm just going to share a few announcements from the symposium curation team, and then we will call it a wrap on this session. Please don't forget to check out our digital art gallery on our website and our live online events listings. Upcoming opportunities to see live digital performance include Free Falling Monthly tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, the Crosswires Cabaret tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and Mind of a Snail's virtual Shadow Jam on Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. All of these listings and links to ticket access are available on our website live digital presentations section. And if you enjoyed this event, if you have attended other symposium events that you enjoyed, I hope you'll please donate to the ADC. The link is just below me if you're on the levelup.designers.ca, or you can go to our website and click the Donate Now button. Please check out upcoming events. We have 2 more weeks of symposium events, and I hope that you'll submit some feedback for us via email at levelup@designers.ca. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance today, and I hope that we'll see you later at the Roundtable event. If you would like to register, there's still lots of room. So if you want to have a conversation with fellow attendees about integration and the concepts around audience interactivity, then I hope you'll join us for that event. It's in about 90 minutes' time. So see you all soon at the Roundtable.